Johnson, and this is Focus on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmer, Mount Nimba to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pocondre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Talk about home affairs, in diaspora, current affairs, reliable information, history, talking about culture, politics, education, entertainment, business, sports, advertisement, articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
And I am Anthony Seed. A pleasant welcome to Focus on Liberia. This is the Liberia History Channel, always presented here by Carl Famila. If you are just joining us, we want to say welcome and welcome to the broadcast today. Do us that favor and share the broadcast. Liberia history is something that we all must be part of to learn it, to know who we are. And so the history is here this evening. Carl has done her research as usual, and she's here with another exciting presentation. The topic is the one that I like. Carl, what do we have for today?
So today we are going to talk about Aboriginal rights and citizenship as it pertains to Liberian history.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it mean to be an Aborigine or a native? And what is the difference between that and citizenship?
Mm-hmm.
Can you have both Aboriginal rights and citizenship rights? And do all citizens have Aboriginal rights? So those are questions and things that we need to look at in the historical context so we can understand the present. Because a lot of this has to do with, there's certain rights that Aboriginal people have that all citizens do not have, but not the other way around, right?
That's correct.
So Aborigines don't have, regular citizens don't have rights that Aborigines lack. And Aborigines, however, do have certain rights that all citizens do not have. And that's something that we never really talk about. At least I've never heard anyone talking about it. So I just wanted to have kind of a discussion about it and look at it in the historical context and then talk about what the reasons are for that. Because we see a lot of people who confuse citizenship and Aboriginal rights. They go, I want to make this another tribe in Liberia. Let me add this to the tribes in Liberia, become a citizen. They're denying me citizenship. No, they're not denying you citizenship rights. They're denying you Aboriginal rights. It's a difference.
All right, that difference And the history around it all, we will get to know in this edition of the
Yeah.
Liberian History Channel, presented here by Carl Famona and I'm Anthony C. Our hosting. We will be starting immediately after this very brief break. Stay tuned and share the show.
Our country, sweet Mandela, our country, that God gave us this country. Tell Liberia, that God gave us this country. We are calling on everyone here to come and pray for this country, Liberia, God gave us this country.
Indeed, God has given us this country. We must know the history of this country, and God is here to help us get some understanding of the history of this country. And I want to remind you about our topic, and here it is: the history of Aboriginal rights and citizenships in Liberia. God, get us started.
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, it is a discussion that I think we should be having as Liberians. People around the world don't seem to be as confused about the two things as we are. And I think the reason for that is just the context of history. And then the fact that these things aren't even really explained to people in school, the students, the children aren't really explained why they have clan land rights and, customary land rights. They don't understand that that's tied to the recognition of Aboriginal people, or what we call native people in Liberia. And we also have some very politicized narratives that claim that that everybody migrated here. There's no native people. Everybody's a migrant here, and we've clearly debunked that in the episode of the History Channel, which is titled "Who Are the Natives of Liberia?" I encourage everybody to please take a look at that episode, because it really breaks down the difference between ancient migration, ancient prehistoric migration, and what we call, modern migrants or immigrants. It's not the same thing. So people moving or archaic humans migrating across the world thousands of years ago is not the same as the Mani invasion, for example, or any of those kinds of things that happened in more recent recorded history. And also we debunked the concept that there's such a thing as Kru people walking to this Grain Coast speaking Kru. The language has been proven to be endemic, meaning it evolved right where it is.
Right.
Because the Kru people come from Ivory Coast. What is Ivory Coast and what is Liberia, and why is that irrelevant when these boundaries are arbitrary? And in fact, most of the Kru or Clow speaking people are on the Liberia side of the border anyhow. But even if they were not, what is Ivory Coast and Liberia? There's no, impenetrable boundary, between the places that we call Ivory Coast and Liberia. In fact, much of Ivory Coast used to be Liberia. So saying that people migrated from Ivory Coast is ridiculous. And it's the same, with so many things. And then we're also going to get into the fluidity of ethnicity and how that has caused so much ethnic confusion among our people. Because they have been, we as Liberians have been forced to look at ethnicity as some hard and fast rule, like it's some, line drawn in the sand that people can't crisscross. Ethnicity changes. It changes, sometimes in just a generation. There are people today who say that they are this ethnic group and their grandparents were something else, right?
Right.
I was talking to a good friend of mine the other day, and he pointed out that when Sekou Touré became president of Guinea, when Guinea got its independence, all of a sudden, the number of people who consider themselves to be Malinka in Guinea tripled.
Triple increase.
Okay, everybody wants to be Sekou Touré's relative now, right? So Malinka people, those who identify themselves as Malinka, they tripled. Even his great grandfather, Amani Samori Touré, in his conquest, to unite people against French incursion. He created more Malinka people out of people who were that were formerly not Malinka. Turned Pele, Loma, different people into Malinka people. Speak our language, convert to Islam, and you will not be a slave. You will be part of our empire, because Islam, exempted you from being a slave. So many, many, many people who are part of the slave class converted to Islam, adopted the Malinka language. They have no ancestral ties to the people of Kankan. They're people of the rainforest, but they became Malinka because ethnicity is not blood, it is identity. And there are people who are biologically descendant of the Bambara and the Malinka of Kankan, the Bambara of what we call Mali today, who are no longer speaking those languages and may consider themselves to be something else today. But their great-great-grandparents were from those places. So it's very important for you to understand that ethnicity in our part of the world is very, very complicated. It's not some hard and fast rule as people have been led to believe. So what I have on the cover here is one of our former presidents, Gibson.
Okay.
And then we also have next to him a quarter chief from the Ga clan area in Nimba, which is where I'm from.
Okay.
And these two men were photographed probably about 10 years apart. And so I just took the two of them as an example of the people who, the random examples of people who comprise modern day Liberians. The man on the right is not much unlike what my great grandfather would have been like, when he was younger. And then the man on the left is not unlike what many other people's great grandfathers would have been like, right?
Right, exactly.
So the history of Aboriginal rights and citizenship. Again, all citizens do not have Aboriginal rights, but all Aboriginal people have citizenship rights.
So that begs the question, Carl. When you say Aboriginal rights, what are those?
So we'll go to the next slide. I'll kind of break that down.
Okay.
So the native or indigenous people of a country are called Aboriginals. These are in Liberia, of course, our government, when it was formed in 1847, it wasn't recognized before 1847. It was recognized with the Constitution and the Declaration that Liberia is now a republic. So in 1847, when the African repatriated people took over and demanded their sovereignty, one of the things that they did immediately upon declaring that sovereignty was to instate a constitution which effectively recognized the rights of Aboriginal people to their land. This had never happened with any settler colony or any European conquest ever. So this thing that we do, which we try to draw an analogy between Liberians and other people, this is the first and the greatest factual debunking of that false narrative. The fact that in the Constitution, Aboriginal land rights are etched in stone. And because of that, in 2024, we still have Aboriginal land rights. Even with the coming in force of the 1986 Constitution, those are some of the elements of the original Constitution that we retained with our right to land. So the concept of Aboriginal land rights, it had to do with recognition of the nations that they met in existence when the Republic was established. This is not a recognition of people who would come later. This is not a recognition of people who would immigrate to the country after independence. This is a recognition of what they met in place when the nation was established. So in Liberia, citizens or the First Nations, indigenous or native kingdoms, as we can call them, were considered to be Aboriginals. So the very first thing is when you recognize that the Africans that you met, the Africans that you signed treaties with to obtain a place to stay and create your state, when you recognize that The vast majority of the land in the adjacent territory was under their control, and they had a right to it based on their own customary laws, their own existing laws. And I have to keep emphasizing this because one of the things that we do a lot of times, we say, well, when they created Liberia, they denied citizenship. You cannot deny citizenship to people who already have citizenship through their various clans. And once you recognize and respect that they are already sovereign, it's not a denial of citizenship, it's a recognition of their right to self-determination. So with that, what they're doing is saying, we can assimilate, you're welcome to be Liberian, but we respect what we met in place. That is something that is extremely profound in this period in history.
So this is a question that comes to mind just to drive the discussion here. Can there be citizenship without a place or without a nation? Can there be?
No.
And why is that so?
So citizenship and belonging is always tied to land. I mean, you've got these people who are running around saying, oh, we're citizens in exile and things like that. I mean, there's some groups of African Americans in the States here who call themselves citizens in exile, which is, but they're not saying they don't have land. They're saying that they're Africans living in North America, and they're the result of, forced immigration that occurred a few generations back, right? But the land is still tied to where their ancestors came from.
Right.
So no, citizenship is definitely tied to a place, to a land mass somewhere.
Thank you.
And so, go ahead.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is the profound information you provide in that when the settlers came, they immediately recognized the custodians of the land, the Aboriginals. And that also meant that they recognized their citizenship. Someone can even argue that they are the original citizens. If there's anything called original meaning in this sense, first group of people. That's what I asked the question earlier. So it is a great piece of information you're providing, that they recognize these people as citizens. And so
I want to be a little bit careful. So we're recognizing them as citizens. The Constitution is recognizing them as sovereign and being in control of their own land, their own laws, and their own kingdoms.
Exactly.
Not saying that you are now, because we're declaring this country, we're now going to say your countries don't exist, your nations don't exist, you're now part of Liberia by force. No, that's not what happened. Okay. What the Constitution is saying is two things. One, those who were already in the territory that wanted to be Liberian were definitely Liberian. Right. But the vast majority of the people that were considered Aboriginal already belonged to their own nations.
Right.
Their own kingdoms, their own societies, with their own laws, their own leaders. And what they were doing was recognizing their right to that sovereignty.
Exactly.
So that's what it's doing. You got it?
Your kingdoms, your clans, your towns, that you have control over time. You remain custodian, but we are becoming a whole now. And so we just want to thank you, because had it not been you here, maybe we would not have that which we put into.
I don't, maybe, but I don't really even think it was that so much. Because you have to remember, in 1847, what they considered to be Liberia, the Republic, was just the coastal part of Bassa, the coastal part of Sino, the coastal part of Monserrato, and a little bit of land up the St. Paul River, that St. Paul River Valley area, right?
Yeah. At that time,
everywhere else, you still had the Vay people controlling what they were controlling, the Gola people, the Gibi people, right?
Yeah.
You had all of these other people controlling their area, and even the Harper, was not part of Liberia in 1847. Robertsport was not part of Liberia, right?
No, at that time, no.
So they're recognizing what is already in place. What they are saying is, all of these adjacent territories, because in 1847 you had European encroachment. And I keep running to remind people that the partitioning of Africa had begun 30, 40, 50 years before the Berlin Conference. So by 1847, Great Britain was already forcibly acquiring land all around them from indigenous people, not recognizing the rights of sovereignty. So one of the things they put into the Constitution was, you're not allowed to take land from indigenous people. And any land that you've purchased from any indigenous people adjacent to this place, that is null and void. It goes back to the people.
Right.
That's entrenched in the Constitution. And they even said they themselves were not allowed to take land from the indigenous people. Very powerful.
Indeed.
We can go to the next slide.
Okay. So this slide, the Liberian government immediately recognized indigenous sovereignty, rights of indigenous peoples to self-determination and to govern their own affairs and cultural practices, except slavery.
Yes. So one of the things that they were repulsed by was the continuation of domestic slavery. In that fact, before the Republic was established, during the time of the Commonwealth, you had Joseph Jenkins Roberts, General Roberts at the time, doing everything he could to snuff out the slave trade on our coast, all the way actually to what is now Ivory Coast, from Galenas, which is now in Sierra Leone, all the way to territory which is now in Ivory Coast, snuffing out all the slave barracoons along the coast. This is one of those things that Joseph Jenkins Roberts could be honored and remembered for. So once that was destroyed, you still had domestic slavery within the territory. So a lot of traditional practices of our people involved the forced subjugation of people that they had conquered, and the exploitation of their labor, even child slavery. So these were things that the Constitution outlawed. So even though you're sovereign, you can do everything, but you can do everything except this.
And Carl, you said domestic slavery. Can you explain that better for our audience to know what kind of practice you're talking about here that was being prohibited?
A good example, Benjamin Joseph Knight Anderson documented King Momoru, who I have a lot of respect for in our history, which is one of the greatest. In fact, King Momoru, whose political seat was in Bopuru, controlled so much territory that he controlled more territory than the Liberian government did, until after the Berlin Conference. King Momoru's territory was greater than the amount of territory that the Liberian government controlled. But King Momoru was documented by Anderson as having many slaves. And the idea was, within his vast territory, which encompassed not just Bopulu, but most of Lofa, most of Nimba, most of Bomi, and some of Cape Mount, this vast area, which is the majority of Liberia, really, population-wise. He said that the slaves outnumbered the freemen 3-1.
Oh, wow.
So the majority of the people living in these territories were being forced to work, forced to be porters, forced to carry on long distance trade by hauling goods, things like salt and ivory across the Sahel to other parts of West Africa. He documented this. And then they were often revolts. And if the revolts were called down, they would be executed for trying to fight for their liberty. That is what is being described as more of chattel slavery. So the government was repulsed by this. And one of the reasons that they had a line of no penetration, you couldn't get past a certain point in Bone County, you couldn't get past a certain point in Bomi to even go into King Momoru's territory for most of the history of Liberia. Really, you couldn't even get there until Daniel Edward Howard's time, when finally Suakoko allowed them to enter, because they didn't want the Liberian government interfering with what they were doing.
And so
they kept the Liberian government.
Did that get resolved, Carl?
Well, I mean, that's a different show. You have to watch the Daniel Edward Howard episode. But essentially, there were so many rolling wars,
right?
And Suakoko was weak and exhausted. And she invited the Liberian government to say, you know what, this is nonsense. if you do not come and quench these wars and quench these fires, we will die. The wars were vicious. The rolling wars were vicious, and this was why the Liberian government was allowed to enter into the territory.
Yeah, I agree. It got to be a whole show so for us to understand everything about it.
In fact, we've done that show. It's the episode on Daniel Edward Howard. But if you all want us to do specifically just about that topic, we can. But just to give a little bit of backstory, so this is how the indigenous or Aboriginal land rights become recognized in the Constitution and otherwise. But this is part of. Go ahead. You can go ahead and read it.
Okay, so let me read it. We recognize in all men certain natural and inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the right to acquire, possess, enjoy, and defend property. By the practice and concern of men in all ages, some system or form of government is proven to be necessary to exercise, enjoy, and secure those rights. And every people have a right to institute a government and to choose and adapt that system or form of it, which in their opinion will most effectually accomplish these objects and secure their happiness, which does not interfere with the just rights of others. The right, therefore, to institute government and to all the powers necessary to conduct it is an inalienable right and cannot be resisted without the grossest injustice. Profound statement there, Carl. Explain it.
Yeah. So that essentially, people say, oh, what was the motive? These people wrote their motives down, right? The founders, Hillary Teague, wrote the Declaration of Independence. These people, the Constitution Committee, these people wrote down, Sam Benedict, these people wrote down what their intentions were. Elijah Johnson, they wrote down what they were intending to do. They wrote their motives down. Immediately, 1847, we recognize in all men certain natural and inalienable rights. And because they recognized that in all men, they were repulsed by slavery. You have a right to live your life as you choose, but you cannot infringe upon the rights of others. These men were luminaries. They were brilliant. They were way before their time.
They were indeed cognizant of the rights of people.
They were way before their time. And, I always say if people were really taught these things in school, we wouldn't be as confused as we are, right?
I won't agree. I won't disagree.
This is not something that's buried. I joke with Dennis all the time. I say, yeah, they buried our history, but they buried it in a very shallow grave. You're not hard to scratch the surface and see these things. So it's not something that, is hidden so far that we cannot access it. So we can go on to the next slide unless you have questions on this.
No, I will read the next slide here quickly. From time to time, our number has been increased by migration from America and by accession from native tribes. And from time to time, as circumstances require it, we have extended our borders by acquisition of land by honorable purchase from the natives of the country.
So this is part of the Declaration of Independence. Hillary Teague authors this, and Hillary Teague said that, so right away, 1847, he says, our numbers have increased by migration from America and by accessions from native tribes, meaning people voluntarily becoming Liberian, indigenous people. So one of the myths or the disinformation about Liberia is that they didn't let native people be citizens. Right away in the Declaration of Independence, he's saying our numbers have increased by accessions from native tribes. If we take nothing else away from this show, is to remind people that no group of natives became citizens at the same time. That's a myth. But individual people or small groups of people can become Liberian over time. So citizenship is not the property of ethnicity, it is the property of individuals. I hope this makes sense.
It does.
No,
Certainly.
nobody ever said, okay, today all Bassa people are citizens. Today, all the 5 people are citizens. That's not what happened. What happened was the people who were going to school or living on the coast or living in the close proximity to people gradually came on board. They become educated, they get baptized, they culturally assimilate, they become part of the Liberian government or the Liberian citizenship, right? And many of the times, some of these indigenous people who became Liberian citizens early on or before independence and were the first citizens of Liberia at independence, or as they say, joined the settlement before independence, became among the first Liberian citizens. Some of them had dual identity. You were a citizen of Liberia, but you could still go back to your clan. A lot of times they cut the clans off and just became fully Liberian and said, you know what? Because I'm Christian now, I can no longer go back to living the way I was living before. Both things happened, depending on the individuals. So right in the Declaration of Independence in 1847, they're saying that we have indigenous people who are citizens. So it's a recognition that our numbers have been increased by accessions from native tribes. From native tribes. And that they acquired property through honorable purchase. Any questions on that?
No, it is clear to me here.
Okay.
So we will move to the next slide. And folks in cyberspace, we want to remind you this is the Liberian History Channel. Invite somebody. It is time for us to learn about our nation's history. The more we know about our country, maybe we'll start taking responsibilities. Let me read this quickly. I'll call. Section 13. The great object of forming these colonies being to provide a home for the dispersed and oppressed children of Africa, and to regenerate and enlighten the benighted continent. None but Negroes or persons of Negro descent shall be eligible to citizenship in this republic. Section
So
14.
I want to back up. So this is not saying that you have to be Aboriginal to be a citizen.
Okay.
And I think a lot of the confusion that Liberians have is that, we get 16 tribes and those 16 tribes are Liberians. No, those are Aboriginal people. What this is saying is you must be Black to be a Liberian citizen. It's not saying you have to be Aboriginal.
Okay.
And Negro or Blackness in the context of the Liberian Constitution is defined the same way it was defined by transatlantic slavery. If you would have been enslaved because of who you were, you are therefore a Liberian, because this was a place for the oppressed children of Africa, the oppressed descendants of Africa abroad and even on the continent of Africa.
Right.
That this place is an asylum of liberty for African people.
So this foolishness, and I'm not missing my words here, from
I was gonna say
our brothers and sisters. Oh, that man from Guinea. Oh, that person from Sierra Leone. So the non-Liberian citizen is nothing but sheer foolishness, because what we read here by the founders is saying, look, the whole continent, in as much as you were dispersed, you were oppressed, and you are Black, it doesn't matter what part of the planet you come from, in as much as you are Black and you come to settle here, you are a Liberian.
that was the intent. That's the purpose for which the country was established.
So
the republic itself.
Yeah, section 14 then reads.
So there's a duality here, right? There's two things happening. The first thing is we recognize indigenous people and their rights.
That's one.
As far as I know, the first country on the first modern state to do that is Liberia. Because the United States had not done this yet. Australia sure as heck hasn't done this yet. South Africa hadn't done this yet. Nobody, this was only because the people who settled in Liberia knew they were Africans. And if they were denying rights to Africans, they'd be denying their own rights.
Exactly.
So their logic was sound and reasonable and rational, right? So here they are right away. They're recognizing the fact that there's indigenous people and they have a right to their land and their sovereignty. And they are simultaneously creating an asylum for the descendants of Aboriginal Africans to return to their place of origin. So there's a duality. One of the things that I always quote Joseph Jenkins Roberts, this is Africa and we are Africans, is what he would tell these Europeans.
Right.
This is Africa and we are Africans. We have a natural right to be here. You do not.
Yeah.
As red as Joseph Jenkins Roberts was, that was his assertion. Whenever faced with an attack on Liberian sovereignty, his assertion was, this is Africa and we are Africans.
Section
Unlike
14.
you, we have a natural right to be in Liberia. And so go ahead, section 14.
Section 14, the purchase of any land by any citizen or citizens from the Aborigines of this country for his or their own use or for the benefit of others or estates in free simple shall be considered null and void to all intents and purposes.
So basically, there were English people, ACS, the whites, owners of ACS, philanthropists from ACS had acquired property. British people had acquired property. In some areas, the French supposedly had acquired property from Aboriginal. The Constitution returned the land to the Aboriginal people. It's null and void. You no longer own their land.
Wow.
Which was a very dangerous thing to do for a young country declaring its independence, because one of the things that ACS said, what happens to our property?
Restricting land ownership to all the Liberians.
And Samuel Benedict, the president of the Constitution Committee, said, we went into this session in this Baptist church to declare our independence, not to discuss your land rights.
It was no up for discussion whatsoever.
It was not on our agenda. And we've now declared independence. And what they did was they freed the land. They recognized that there was already this land grab scramble for Africa, and where they cast their boundaries, the hinterland boundaries, was to the headwaters of all of the rivers that flowed through their territory. So even places they had not seen, they have not been, they cast the stone of their territory far north to the headwaters of their boundaries, meaning this is our greater territory. So they recognize the Aboriginal people that if you have purchased land in these areas that is no longer yours, by the Declaration of Independence, it's null and void. So this gives back. It didn't free Sierra Leone, right? It didn't free certain parts of Cote d'Ivoire, it didn't free Gambia, it didn't free all these places, but it freed much of what is Zerikore today and the northern part of Liberia, where they had never seen. And it freed a lot of the coastal territory that the British had already claimed and had their flags waving. This is going to be very important when we talk about the British crimes against Liberia. Yeah, and this is one of the reasons for the instigation of the crew wars, as they call it, because the British are always, for almost 100 years, the British fought to get the land back.
I can't wait for that show call.
For almost 100 years, the British fought to get their land back. So here we're talking about, we can go to section 15.
Yeah, section 15 reads, the improvement of the native tribes and their advancement in the arts of agriculture and husbandry being a cherished object of this government, it shall be the duty of the president to appoint in each county such discreet person whose duty it shall be to make regular and periodical tours through the country for the purpose of calling the attention of the natives to these wholesome branches of industry and of instructing them in the same, and the legislature shall, as soon as it can conveniently be done, make provision for these purposes by the appropriation of money.
Yes. So right away, we have to also remember 1847. People say, oh, I've heard people say, well, why were they trying to stick the native people to agriculture? I said it was 1847. The Industrial Revolution had not happened yet. The whole world was on agriculture. Even the United States, Europe, agriculture was it. America was, cotton was king in America. That's why they needed slave labor. Slavery wasn't abolished yet in 1847. America still has slaves because agriculture was it. And they needed cheap or free labor. So now they're saying that they want to invest in bringing the Aboriginal population up to a level of production so that they're competitive in the world market, and that it was the responsibility of the central government to do so.
Right.
This is in the 1847 Constitution. But when you don't understand the context of history and you read this by itself, oh, why they wanted the people to do animal husbandry and farming, is that all we good for? I said, what you wanted them to put in the Constitution 1847, computer science, aerospace engineering. What you wanted them to put in 1847 in the Constitution? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was, what else was there was 1847? What they were supposed to tell the people to do? Because all the rich people in Liberia were farmers, right?
And they were very
they had cotton farms and coffee farms and tobacco farms, and that's what it was. So that was the industry. They didn't know that the world was going to become industrialized. You know, there was no machinery, there was no automobile industry, there was no such thing as electricity yet.
No,
it was 1847. There was no.
Did you see how intentional they were, even at the level of the legislature, that appropriation should be made, meaning money should be made available for them to get engaged in agricultural activities?
They put it in the Constitution and they removed it from the 1986 Constitution. And if you look at the activities of the government before 1986, you had rice farms in places like Bong. They were creating agriculture because that was what the Constitution required. That's what the Constitution required.
So, Carl, at that time, when this was in place now, it was by law, how self-sufficient was Liberia at the time in terms of food?
Well, I mean, we were exporting, and Liberia's always, as far as the Republic's concerned, there's always been provisions to import it. Mm-hmm. But the starch staple, the basic survival, food security was stronger in 1847 because you had people who were producing and even exporting food. So the history of that on the Grain Coast has always been production and exportation of food. We exported rice there for many, many centuries. It's a little bit of a loaded question because later on what happens is that the Europeans and the Americans institute a trade embargo against Liberia where they cut off all trade and try to sabotage Liberia's economy to get Liberia to basically crack and give up its sovereignty.
Right.
So after the Berlin Conference, you see a lot of things, attacks on the Liberian economy because they don't want that kind of because Liberia stood as an affront to European and American imperialism.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. All right. On this slide says, unlike their British, French, Portuguese, German, and Belgian counterparts, the governing colonialization society of these immigrants did not simply help themselves to the land of the Africans they encountered. Instead, those early societies acknowledged that the Africa they arrived in was far from empty of owners, and that instead of every land was owned by communities, each of these a discrete territory with known boundaries, owned collectively and often well defended and governed by long established kings. They were recognizing the profound leadership
So,
of the
yeah, the
Aborigines at the
person,
time?
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. I'm quoting Liz Alden Wiley here, right?
Okay,
She is
right.
a cultural anthropologist and
Mhm.
a land tenure expert. But
Okay.
she wrote this book called "So Who Owns the Forest?" And in fact, that book is available in a digital copy. If you just Google "So Who Owns the Forest," it's about her research and her work in Liberia. But
Mhm.
she instantly, anyone who really studies Liberian history that hasn't been brainwashed into Congo people came and beat us and took our land. If you really just scratch the surface, like I said, our history is buried in a very shallow grave.
Mhm.
This is the conclusion everyone draws because this is what it is. This is the truth. It's the truth. And Liz Alden Wiley writes this down. She's not a Liberian. She's she's a white person writing this about Liberia. And one of the other things that she says is Liberia could redress land injustices more easily than almost any other country on the African continent. And that is because we are not like the other countries on the African continent. We were not colonized where there was no imperial state where people were removed from their land and forced into either concentration camps or townships or some nonsense, right?
No, that didn't
Because from
happen.
the inception of the state, clan and land went hand in hand. Clan and land go hand in hand. That has to do with the recognition of indigenous Aboriginal rights to
Right.
land. And this is part of the land tenure conversation that we're missing. And there we think that everyone who's Liberian has Aboriginal land ownership, and it is not true. It just isn't true. Is it for right or for wrong, for better or for worse? This is a fact of our Constitution. This is a fact of the way the country was established and developed, is the recognition that the Aboriginal people are tied to their land. So if you come from Nigeria, you can be a citizen, but you do not have a right to Aboriginal land rights. You can purchase land, you can get a deed, you can build a house. But the concept of community property belongs to established clans. And that is what a lot of people don't understand. And that's what a lot of recent immigrants to Liberia get angry about. They think it's discrimination. It is not. We who immigrated to the United States, we don't get angry when the Chippewa Indians have a reservation and they have rights to certain Chippewa land. We don't say it's not fair to us. Why we don't have Chippewa Indian land? It's only in Liberia you hear people saying that, right?
Right. And I like the fact that Carl, they're talking about recognizing the territories that were owned and controlled by the people, the known boundaries, and more so that they understood that the people own the land collectively.
Yeah.
And that they didn't only own it collectively, they defended the land and they were able to govern the land. So there's now land that they could just come to and now recognizing the sacrifices made by these people over the years before
Exactly.
trying to put the republic together. I think that was profound.
And it's obvious, right? If you take away all the propaganda from your mind, if we
Mhm.
erase the propaganda of the 1970s and the pretending to be in the same situation as South Africa and all that weird stuff that we did to ourselves that destroyed our country, if we take all of that propaganda out and we look at it for what it is, we know very well nobody took land from us. We know that. I go to Nimba right now and I can say, hey, I want plant cassava. They will give me place. Okay. I go to my town chief, either my mother's town or my father's town, and they will give me place. They're still the custodians.
And Carl, this is so true. I know my father told me because on the southeast, we are more, the family is almost like a quarter. So the quarters even
Mm-hmm.
have name. So I would just go to my quarter chief and say, hey, this person is my father. I want to do this. Say, oh, son, yes, your land, do whatever you want to do because the land collectively is owned by this quarter. So I agree with you. And again, the quote from Liz that you just said, she couldn't put it so bluntly when she said Liberia could redress land injustice more easily than almost any country on the continent of Africa. So We didn't have to go through what people went through in South Africa. You know, in some parts they might still be dealing with, I'm not sure, in other African
Or
countries. So
Zimbabwe or Namibia,
Zimbabwe,
yeah, we don't have that issue.
no,
And we just
very
be running around, who owns our land, our papa's land? What are you talking about? You standing on your land asking who owned it, who took it from you? Right now, you go to Dwazon, you want to buy land, and I buy, some people will sell it to you.
I'll sell it to you. I run
And I
away
have
from
some people will say you can have their place. Yeah, I don't know what we could we have some funny people, it's like we believe things that we anyway. Let's go on
that's
with this slide.
that's not the government of Liberia sending land to people in Liberia, you know. So the Aboriginals, the owner of those lands, are sending the land.
Yeah.
Government just have to give you documentation for that. You know, that is so true.
Yeah.
All right, that will take us to the next slide. Let me see what
Yeah,
we
so this. Let me just give a little backstory here.
please do.
This is separate. This is really about Cape Palmas.
Mhm.
It's a letter that was written by Mr. James Dennis.
Okay.
From Harper, and he was writing some sponsors and supporters in the United States, and he's basically, just to set it up, he's explaining the relationship between the Aboriginal people and the repatriated people who are both descendants of African Americans and recaptured Africans who are living in Cape Palmas. And then
Right.
also the incorporated Grebos who were assimilated into the settlement.
Right.
But
Okay.
you can go ahead.
All
If
right.
it's
So let me go ahead and read that.
Sorry, if it's small, I got my glasses today.
Yeah, it is. This one is small, so let me see
Okay.
if I can do my best here.
Okay.
Let me put it on my B monitor and read it from here. That will be
Right.
better.
Okay.
Okay, Cape Palmas, Liberia. Mr. James H. Dennis, in a letter dated Harper, Cape Palmas, Liberia, May 16, 1896, says the immediately surrounding tribes of natives number many thousands, for they were never depleted and broken up by the slave trade as elsewhere. They are contagious to our settlement and are now very eager for education and most civilized ways of life.
Can
Since
I
the war,
can I stop you right there? Sorry, I want to break it
yeah,
up a
yeah,
little
go
bit.
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So
Mhm,
I want to remind everyone, whenever people in this context in history use the word civilized,
mhm.
and I say this to the students that in the Leadership Academy. In fact, I just had this conversation today with them.
Right.
Civilization, in the context that this author is speaking, simply means westernized Christian people.
Mhm.
But in our own context, right, as Africans, when we talk about civilization basically is being ethical, it's being honest, it's being morally upright. But when they are speaking of civilization in this context, they're really talking about people who are culturally like themselves,
Mhm.
right? So we have
Right.
to understand, just because they say somebody is civilized doesn't mean it's a good person. Doesn't mean that they're actually civil. It just means that they're probably Christian and they're probably dressing and behaving like Europeans with brown skin. That's all it is.
All
But I
right.
always have to clarify that. Don't, oh, I just saying the civilization, civilized. No, well, if they thought our people were not civilized at a business, we know our people were civilized,
Right.
is my point. All right,
Yeah.
then go ahead. Since the war.
Yeah. Since the War of 1895, they have been very loyal to the Liberian government. They are beginning to have a better understanding of the government, its purposes and administration, and to appeal to its officers, and quotes, for redress of grievances. Our people are beginning to recognize them as brothers, in some cases, to intermarry with them, to allow them to participate in government and to elect them to important offices when equally qualified, and when qualified to
Yeah.
fill them as they sometimes are. Since 1887, two native uh,
Grables.
Gribbles.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
it says Jedables. It says Jedables, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you know,
Gribbles.
I don't know if that's a particular clan because you know the Grable people were not all called by one name, but they're basically Grable people.
Okay. Native Jedables, Honorable Samuel W. Seaton and Honorable F.W. Prowl have been elected members of our national legislature and have served with credit to themselves and giving great satisfaction to the whole tribe. What we now greatly need is more and better schools, and these should be largely of an industrial character. Hmm.
So now this is just Cape Palmas, but I like this because it demonstrates what was happening all across the country as people become educated in the Western sense.
Mhm.
As people become assimilated, they become part of the process of governing the country. This is not apartheid. This is gradual assimilation. This is free will becoming Liberian. Nobody's being denied, oh, you can't go to school. In fact, they're forcing and fighting to build more schools. They're asking for assistance to build more schools. They're saying this is what we're doing. We need more and better schools so that we can have more citizens. Because for them, the path to citizenship was acceptance that this way of life was better than the other way of life. Because so long as the people saw the westernized Negroes on the coast as weirdos, right? They didn't want to assimilate. Our indigenous people, whether it be on the coast or in the interior, thought these people were weirdos. And how do you erase or disabuse their minds that we're weirdos? We teach them our ways. We open more schools. We bring their children in, and then they will, they'll be weird like us, and we'll all just be one happy, weird family, right?
Right.
So it is the fact. When people say things, oh, they denied us citizenship, I'm like, well, what y'all take your great great grandfather then for? The people were living, they had their belief systems and their way of life. Literally, the people who came and repatriated looked like weirdos to them. Their customs were strange.
Yeah.
Their language, though they were familiar with English, they were familiar with Portuguese and French before the repatriates came in 1822 and all throughout the early 1800s. Speaking English, the foreigners who are coming to trade is completely different than looking at people who look just like you, completely westernized. They thought that we're weirdos.
Wow. So there was
So
that
it's
period
a gradual process. Yes.
yeah, they were in shock about what's going on here. How come they are like us, but then they are culturally different, but in terms of, culturally, the way they dress,
So
the way they
yeah,
speak.
we have so many. The thing is, the people, the crowd, the Clau ethnic groups that we incorrectly call Kwa, the Clau ethnic groups.
Mhm.
That's the Glebo, the Clau, the people we call Basa. These people that were on the coast
Mhm.
were much faster to assimilate and become Liberian. The people who were not on the coast that were further into the hinterlands, because there's no one group of people called Grebos, right?
Right.
There's no one group of people called Kru.
No.
So the people that are going into Sino, into Upper Maryland, people that call the Bush Grebos or whatever,
Right.
they were weirdos. They thought their own Grebo people on the coast were weird, right? They were like, what are these people doing? And then you have this other side. You got the western part of the country. You got a lot of Muslim people. You got Poro people also.
Yeah.
And they're also looking at these people on the coast that are assimilating. So people send their children to school, like the Massaquoi clan, they send their children to school thinking, oh, go learn these people's ways. It'll be easier for us to trade with them. Then their children go and convert their religion and don't come back home. It was an abomination. It was like, what is wrong with these people? Don't send your children to the schools that will leave you and not come back. So there was a lot of cultural shift going on. So this is a gradual process because there's two ways to incorporate people who are otherwise sovereign into believing in becoming Liberian, either by will or by force. The Liberian government never had the authority, the power, the military strength to forcibly incorporate anybody, right? So it had to be a voluntary process, soft power, negotiations, opening schools, spreading Christianity through evangelism. That is how it was done.
Let me read two comments here and then get your
Sure.
reaction from Dr. Pajibo here. He writes, it was strange to the natives in 1822 that the pioneers, as they were called, bought land from them because traditionally land belonged not only to the living but as well to the dead. So how could it have been so by only the living? And then River Says Pro has a question here. Call, what was the process of becoming a Liberian? What do you mean assimilate to become Liberian?
Okay, let me first, Dr. Pajibo, I beg to differ. There's no one way of believing as indigenous people, right? Land had been sold on the coast long before 1822. You had Europeans living all up and down places like Robertsport. There's a guy named Robert who was living there. They had slave factories that were owned by Europeans, by Portuguese, by British, by Spaniards, all up and down our coast. So they did give people land. They did sell land long before 1822. In fact, the negotiations for land date back way further than any settlement. The people were speaking English. King Peter Brumley was very versed in English. There's this idea that our people were some kind of, ignorant savages that did not understand global trade and global conditions and things about selling land, selling property, even selling human beings is completely ahistorical. The fact of the matter is our people, not only were they engaged in selling human beings, they were engaged in selling land and other things. So the tradition about old people, the ancestors, Liberian coast, the Ivorian coast, the Sierra Leonean coast, most of these areas were being run by slave traders and warlords. There's no traditionalism in this kind of greed that was occurring. We had rolling wars for more than a century before these people returned and repatriated to the coast. So the conditions under which the repatriates returned to, in fact, the first land that they acquired, which was Providence Island, they bought from a mulatto named John S. Mill, who spoke Day and Gola fluently. So we have to be careful. And John S. Mill's English father owned Providence Island before. And Providence Island was a slave depot. It was a place, a dungeon where they kept slaves waiting to be sold. So we can't say that our people didn't know about selling land. It contradicts everything that we've ever discussed and researched. It's not, this concept of the noble savage living on the coast of West Africa is not true. We're not Australians. Liberia is literally in the center of the earth. Look at our proximity to Europe and everywhere else. We were not isolated and we were not ignorant to these things. The people who were on the coast that had power were not ignorant to these things. And they spoke multiple European languages. And to River Says Pro's process, I've already answered that question. You go to school. You decide that you're no longer going to practice, you convert to Christianity, you decide you're going to live in the settlement. And once you're living in the settlement, you're a citizen. Once you said, okay, I believe in this process, it's what I'm going to do. There was no application process. You show up, you go to school, you start living among the people, you're part of them. It was clearly laid out in the letter that you just read.
Yeah.
Right? And then you want to run for office. Once you've acquired education and some popularity and some wealth, you want to run for office, you can.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, it's an interesting question because it's a good question.
Mm-hmm.
It was assumed that all indigenous people were citizens, but it was about them being willing to be part of the republic. It was assumed. It was about them being willing. And eventually it happens by force, right?
Mm-hmm.
With Daniel Howard, and then it's like a semi-autonomy in the hinterland. And then by the time Tubman comes, that's it. No more semi-autonomy. Y'all just Liberian. We'll appoint all your chiefs going forward. We'll have elections. You guys are Liberian, period. You're beholden to the central government. That didn't even happen until Tubman's time.
Okay.
For a lot of Liberia. So what we're looking at here, this particular map,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what I'm going to address here is the ethnic confusion, right? We're confused in Liberia about ethnicity. somebody has tried to put this label tribe on us. You know, in the 20th century, there's this desire to define culturally fluid ethnic groups into these hard, distinct, defined tribes.
Mhm.
This is not natural to us. There could be several reasons for this fluidity in ethnicity. I hold some of this fluidity is not necessarily due to a positive thing. Some of this is due to war and chaos, right? The rolling wars. Some of it is due to trade and intermarriage. But if you look at this map, there's no hard lines where they say, this is the Gola people here. Dennis Job told me when he was in school that there was this map that it will have, and it will show the counties, and it will put the different tribes in the counties. That is a falsehood. That's false. That's not something that even makes any sense. It's like the tribal mask. It's just made up stuff. The truth of the matter is there are no hard and fast lines for where ethnicities are on within our territory, right? It had the counties originally were divided. It had nothing to do with the ethnicities or the languages that were spoken. They divided the counties initially strictly on population. So when they drew the line, they didn't say, okay, we're going to create this place and we're going to make this place and call it Basa, and only people who speak this language will be there. That's not true, right? And same thing with Maryland. And when in 1964, when they divided Nimba, Lofa, Bon, Grand Jita, they did it by population. So you have Crown people in Nimba, you have Basa people in Nimba. They didn't move there; they were always there. They just created Nimba around where they live, right? And so those traditional clans were there before 1847. But when they came and drew the lines that this is a county, you see where the Gola are, where the Mendi are, and the other thing I wanted to point out is the names of these ethnic groups. Most of the names of these ethnic groups that we use are not correct. Nobody calls Kru people, called them Kru people before, the slave trade. And they were working on these ships, and they were calling them the Kru, and they even called the people we call Basa today Kru. They were calling Grebo people Kru. And the Cloud people just took their Kru thing and put it on their head and say we Kru. They don't call themselves Kru. Right?
Right.
Nobody calls Basa people Basa. Nobody. They don't even call themselves Basa in their language. When they're referring to themselves, they don't say they're Basa. They got different names for themselves. But none of the dialects of the language we call Basa today refer to themselves as Basa. It's because that place was called Basa by the Portuguese. And so those are the people of Basa. They just stuck on them Basa people. And then somebody said, well, our language, it sounds like they're saying Father Rock or Father Stone. So maybe that Father Rock, where Father Rock's people, they're just making that up because they didn't know that the Portuguese named the place Basa. But it's not who they are. And their ancestors wouldn't even recognize Basa if you told them they were Basa. We just accept somebody naming us. We get angry that Monrovia is called Monrovia, but we're not angry that they're calling our people Basa people or calling our people Kru people. That one okay. That one okay, but we got to change the flag. We got to change all these things, but we don't have to change the fact that we're calling down people Gio, which means slave. That is something that we should be talking about changing, but we're not talking about changing that one. So the names of these ethnic groups are sometimes even derogatory.
Especially the one with Gil you just mentioned, meaning slaves. Why would you call it?
Yeah, it's very derogatory. And we don't talk about that. I want all right,
So, I mean, let's go through the list a little bit for the benefit of the audience. So the Gio means slaves. So they shouldn't be called Gio people because that is not, proper for them. It's like telling them, hey, you are a slave. That's why you
right. And some of them will argue because it's a little embarrassing, right? You spend your whole life identifying yourself as a Gio person, and then here comes people saying, this actually means slave, and then they have to try to justify it. Or you tell Basa people, you're really not Basa, right? You know that this place was called Basa Cove by the Portuguese. And the only and then they used to call you people either crewmen or fishmen. They had different names of y'all.
Right.
Based on y'all don't call. I mean, the other Cloud speaking ethnic groups refer to them as Mani people. right? They don't call them, but nobody calls them Basa except Europeans. And now they have taken it and put it on their head and they're throwing it around with a vengeance. And if you say, hey, let's go back, we are Basa, that's not true. We know who we are. You know who you are, but that name not correct.
So-called, I'm from the crew side. Anything derogatory about the war crew? What does it mean when they say, "Oh, crew people"? Because I know, like too, we are cloud.
Yeah.
So where did the war crew come
They
from?
just made it up. They just made it up. Europeans, it was just like, this is, if you wanted to buy goods on the coast, these guys who will come in the dugout canoes and bring the things out, so the ships cannot come to the beach because of the big granite rocks, right?
Right.
So the canoes had to be carried out. This is the crew. And a lot of them used to sell their labor to these ships.
Oh, now I get it, because
yeah. So the workers, a lot of the young boys, the young boys will lead a village. Yes, sir. The young boys will lead a village and even leave their fishing towns and say, hey, this is more lucrative than even the fishing we're doing.
Right.
And if you engage in transporting slaves and goods and other things, they're calling you the crew. And that's they can't put on your head.
Wow. It's also like, for me, who in the airline industry, the personnel, the flight attendant, the pilots, we put them together, they are crew.
Yeah.
So I see. So those were personnel or individuals who were working on these ships and doing some work. They start calling them crew. And
yes.
See, but basically we are cloud. We are cloud.
Yes, and also they would even refer to what we call Basa and what we call Grebo. Also, we will refer to those people as crew as well.
Okay.
And it I don't think crew is as derogatory as like Bele, or Gil, right? So Bele, according to Dr. Patrick Burroughs, Bele means savages. The Bele people, the savages. That's a derogatory term.
That is offensive.
They call themselves the Kua people, right? So the Kua, you go from Kua to calling them Bele because Bele means savage.
And why is it called? Let me practical here a little bit. I know you brought that up, that this is why people should be advocating for to change. Look at they are referring to you as savages, and up to this time, and there has not been any leadership from their side to say we got to change this. They do not call us savages. It has to change.
Exactly. But we want to change the flag. But we should be called slave. We should be called savage. We should just be called any kind of arbitrary. The Europeans that were interacting with us didn't care to call us cloud or the crew. That's the crew people, the crew. And just, we put it on our head because, as I jokingly say all the time, because we think that Kui thing. Yeah. Oh, our Kui named that Gyo. Because what are you doing? You don't say to none of your neighbors. Nobody calls you that. You don't call yourself that when you're speaking your own language. Why you let other people name you?
River says, "Pro say we let a bastard name because it's cool."
Yeah, because it sounds cool, right? And also because there's not one name for all the people that we call Basa. That's the other thing to point out. There's not really one name for all the people that we've put together and called Glebo, right?
Yeah.
They have different, like, what was the name? They said the Jedabo, right? The Jedabo people from the Jedabo clan. So you get Jedabo, you get I forgot what the group that Dennis Ja comes from. Different Grebo people come from different clans, or not clans, but linguistic subsets, and then they take those linguistic subsets. They each have a name. The people we call Basa, the group of them in Riverside, the people from Bezon, the people from Buchanan area, they refer to them with a different name.
Right.
They're not exactly the same, right? And the Mamba and the B and all these different people, they have divisions within them. So there's never been really one word to encompass all of those people. So maybe they're embracing Basa because they can all just say, yeah, we Basa.
Yeah.
Because if you refer to the words that they call themselves in their languages, it's different depending on where they're from.
Exactly. Yeah. So, concerning the clarification you made earlier to Dr. Pajibo's earlier points, he writes, "Great. And I understand, I agree with you, my professor, but as land belongs to the people collectively, for example, clan land, quarter land, and chiefdom land, and how could one man, Mr. Mill, alone self-providence island that belongs collectively to the Golans? He ended with a question there, even though
because Chief Pajibo, the people on the coast were not traditional people like that.
Mhm.
Oh, I'm really trying to explain. You're describing a phenomenon that was not existing at all among these slave traders, right? If you go into the Poro people area way into the north, that's a different thing that's happening. If you
Right.
go into the northern part of the upper part of Sino, if you go up the Kavala River, that different thing that's happening.
Mhm.
But when you're on the coast and you're dealing with these warlords on the coast, they're not recognizing those traditions. They have their own culture. It's different.
Mhm.
These people have been westernized. They've been they're commercializing things. They're looking that they have different values. So I'm not saying that you're incorrect in general terms. I'm saying those ideals did not apply in 1822, maybe in the 1400s, but not in 1822, and definitely not at places like Cape Mazarada.
Yeah, so Jermaine Eastman's right. This is typical. The Europeans commonly referred to native people in derogatory manner. Bantu means savage. Bantu is not a tribe, nor how these people refer to themselves.
Oh,
And
Bantu doesn't mean savage. Bantu is actually an African word, and Bantu means human.
okay, and
Bantu
that
means
people
human.
right. And
When the
this
Europeans
Japan,
ask them, "Who are you?" I'm Bantu. I'm a man.
I'm a man. Okay.
Yeah. What are you? A spirit? What are you? A ghost? What are you? You look strange. Where's your color? I'm Bantu. I'm man. So they just say, "Oh, these must be Bantu people."
And Pajibo said the this jar comes from the Grebo subtribe called Jidipo.
Yeah. So, for example, thank you for that. So Jidipo people,
Yeah,
and Jeddah. What was the other one that we? Where the two senators were from the Jeddah.
yeah, Jidipo.
So these are all different subgroups that have their own names for themselves. And the people so this is when I talk about ethnic confusion. Even among the people we call Pele,
Yeah.
they have subsects. They don't have all one name, right? But now because we want to put people in a box called tribe, we take many, many diverse people, put them into one category. So this is Pele. Well, this person could be, from the Jaikwai people. This person could be from. There's different groups. People in Tori call themselves different from the people in Banga.
All right. Here we have the Mansful's tribe seem to have been hill people expanding southwest along the ridges between river valleys. The Kru tribes were at home on the water and spread readily across rivers and along the coast toward the northwest. The many invasions and migrations, the incessant inter-tribal wars with slave raiding and capture of foreign wives covering a long period of years have contributed to the existing ethnic confusion in this part of Africa. So here you're talking about the reasons for the confusions about ethnicity or tribes. Is that what this is?
Mm-hmm.
And this is written by George. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is George Schwab.
Joshua. Yeah.
George Schwab. So, we were talking a little bit about the ethnic confusion, right? And the identity. And we saw the map where there's no clear, distinct lines between where one ethnic group ends or where another begins.
Right.
Ethnicity in our area is a fluid phenomenon. Indigenous clan land ownership and indigenous land rights were really extended to people in the hinterland for the most part, where those things were still instated. The areas where we see either snuffing out slave factories, most of the coastal towns are built on top of, in fact, all of the coastal towns are built on top of slave factories. All of them, Robertsport, Monrovia, Edina, Buchanan, all of them, Fishtown, Harper, all of them were built on top of ports where they would pick up slaves in the previous 200 years. And even in 1822, 1832, 1842, and so on, of the decades after people started repatriating, they were still, until they snuffed out the slave trade completely, operating as slave factories. And as they would destroy the factories, they would extend the territory. This is a no-go zone for slavery, and they would build a town. The human beings who were released from the slave barracoons would not be returned to where they came from. So you don't go back. If they caught you, let's say near Ganta, where I'm from, and dragged you down to Edina to sell you into slavery, and now they've liberated you in Edina, you're not going to go back to Ganta because you will probably be sold into slavery again, or maybe your whole town has been burned and you got nowhere to go back to. So what you did, you settled in Edina with the recaptured Africans and everybody else, and then you just became Liberian. You became baptized, you changed your name to John, and that was it. You didn't go back up the St. John River so they could be you and sell you again.
Interesting.
So most of those towns that were established were both established by people who were indigenous but were in shackles and liberated right on the spot, and they became grateful to their liberators and became incorporated. So this slide that I'm showing you here, this is another example of the ethnic confusion. There is no such thing in African culture, and especially not here on the Grain Coast where we come from in Liberia, where you have a mass that represents a language family. First of all, the people that we've forced into these categories we call tribes, which are a diverse group of people, like we've already established, that the Bassa people are not just one group of people, but we force them to be Bassa. You know, so the different subsets are not even recognized. There's no one mask representing Bassa people. That's a lie. So I don't know, why we even accept this, right? So there's look at the Vai mask. They just have a typical Mendi Sunday, mask on the one on the left. If you go to the one on the right, it's completely different. Look at the Vai mask. It doesn't look anything like the Vai mask on the left because this stuff is made up. It's all made up. On the left, look at how they did the mono mask, and then on the right, look how they did the mono mask. They don't even look like the same mask. So this is just made up stuff. Now, do we have masks in our tradition? Do we have masked judges that come out and dispense justice, that come out when people are sick, that come out to solve palaver? Yes, but they don't represent a language group. There's no one way that mono people got this mask, and everybody that the mask that represents them. Everybody that say they crew, that a mask that represents it. It's a disrespect to our heritage. This is ridiculous. It's like, we need to give the native people symbols and that create masks for all the tribes. What is that? And why do we accept it? Why are we rolling with this? It's like we just roll with it. Yeah, the 16 tribes are like, right, here are our masks. It's just some feel-good, funny stuff that's actually more derogatory than they think it was, right? I actually take offense to this. Because there's no basis in anything. It's like, let's just, to appease the natives, let's just give them a symbol. We'll just create some masks, some ugly masks that kind of look like masks we might have saw, or might have seen, I'm sorry. And look at the Madingo mask and the orange one. That is really, really dumb. Like those are not traditional masks. Like, what are they doing? And then look at the Grebo mask on the bottom that they put horn on it.
Yeah.
You want to tell me that all the Grebo people, the people that we call Grebo, they got one mask that represents their people? You know that's not true. We all know that's not true, but why are we rolling with this?
Yeah, I have no clue why.
Why we accept this? It's so disrespectful, like, And there's another example of it there. More masks. Like every time you see this, the masks are going to be different because they just make up stuff.
Yeah.
And look at a Vai mask on this one.
Yeah,
completely different. The Pella mask. So yes, we have choral masks, we have traditional masks, we have mask dancers that come out. We've got Beitu, we've got, all these different masks and mask dancers and stuff, but they do not represent a so-called tribe
No.
or a so-called ethnic group. You got 100 million Malinke people in West Africa. You want to tell me all of them have a mask to represent them? Only the ones who live in Liberia get masks. It's silly. 100 million people, they're represented by a mask. Where the people met in Kankan and said we get masks, and if you're Malinka in Liberia, this is the mask, and if you're Malinka in Gambia, this is your mask. I mean, this is silly. Only the Mono people in Liberia get masks. When you go Guinea, the Mono people don't have masks because the masks that our people use are about our tradition, not about our so-called tribe. And in the Poro tradition, the Sunday tradition, people from different ethnic groups can go to the same, anyway. I just wanted to say that is just some of that arbitrary stuff that they do to try to appease people. Instead of teaching true history, they give them these fictitious symbols and say, you see, you get masked. I don't know who came up with that.
I have no clue.
Why we didn't put a person in the center of the town? Every tribe get masked. We should have put the person in the center of the town and booed him.
And isn't that so obvious? I mean, if you come from Liberia, there won't be any confusion about this thing. There's not a mask for a particular tribe. So I don't know how. I mean, are they trying to develop something and just stick it on us? Because it has to be something that but Sonny, we were foolish enough to accept it, right? That's the point, right? I mean, why would you accept something? Because our elders are there. They didn't know that there is not a mask for a group of people. You know what I think? Represented something, maybe maybe in the Poro mask, something like that, but not an entire tribe to have a mask. It's not. It's not. I know that from us in the Southeast that during the war dance, there are some masks you will wear. Maybe it will represent a warrior. Yeah. All right. Maybe it will represent, for lack of better word, a certain devil that our people maybe reference sometime in the past. Yes. That's what it is. But to say the entire tribe have a mask and people come up with this is foolishness. And nobody questions it. No more questions. Everybody questions it. Everybody says, all right, we roll with it, right? We just roll with it. People are documenting this as history, and we need to correct that. And you go to the Ministry of Information, Culture, and Tourism. Here are the 16 tribes of Liberia, and here are their masks. Now that is what you call derogatory. Yeah. It's insulting, and it is baseless. It is. And I was baseless. There. I saw that. I looked at it. I said, okay, let me just pass. But a lot of people will argue with you. Get it, and they teach this to children in school. Mm-hmm. So and what's going on here in this slide, Carl? What's going on here in this slide? I was just, indigo, the dark blue on the Liberian flag is the color indigo, which is the color of the Mendi people, which is the majority of the people that are in Liberia. And in fact, even our Cloud cousins also adopt indigo a lot in their style, because as you can see, ethnicity is fluid. And so we all exchange cultural tenets. You can go all the way to Nimba and see some Cloud, traditions infused into the culture, because for many, many centuries, we've all interacted and traded and fought wars and intermarried and all of these things. But the dark blue on the flag that represents Africa, indigo was the color of Africa on our flag. And I just put this up to show some this idea that, red, white, and blue, they're not African colors. Indigo is always worn with red beads. This is our culture. This is our culture. Yeah, So yeah. I remember this, for lack of better word, country club. Mm-hmm. And coming up, I saw it with the woman that read me, my father's aunt. She was a chief, by the way. She was the chief for all the 12 towns of Sastan. Highly respected and rich. Based on our culture, she had extensively traveled to Ghana and Nigeria. So whenever at the time a woman gave birth, they would go to her. She was a midwife as well.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were leaving, she will be able to give them, enough of lapels that they will use, to make baby diapers and things like that. So I remember this very well. And this is what she would give me as my cover cloth all the time. I was her favorite
Very
son.
nice. That's beautiful. I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So
So this is the end of my quick presentation. Are there any other comments that you'd like me to address?
yeah, let me see if there's any comment. Yeah, from River Prosi. I didn't read it, so let me read it now. It took decades before the Native Americans recognized that names such as red skin, crazy horse, scarface, etc., were derogatory. Do you think we will have such name
Okay.
revolution amongst the tribes of Liberia?
First of all, River says, Abraham, you don't know much about American history. 'Cause first of all, Scarface was an Italian gangster. Crazy Horse was his name. That was his name in direct translation to English. He was a warrior. My
Mhm,
respect to him. Peace be unto his ashes.
mhm.
He called himself Crazy Horse. And Redskins is just, that is a derogatory word. So the other two things that you're describing here are completely unrelated to Redskins. Crazy Horse, that's what he called himself. That was the translation of his name into the English language. So that's not derogatory. And he meant what he said. That was his warrior name. And as far the Redskins are concerned, it's considered to be derogatory because they're using it to describe, mascots for a team. That's completely different.
Okay.
And there was no revolution among indigenous people at all. It was just a recognition of political correctness to say, hey, it's not right to call people redskins or rednecks or
Right.
blackie or the N word and all these kinds of things because it was racist. That is
Yeah.
completely different from us in Liberia calling ourselves Basa and Gio and things like that. Completely different. I don't see it as being analogous at all. But
Yeah.
also, yeah, don't confuse. I mean, Scarface is a gangster movie.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that there has been any revolution to change that. Just people recognizing that, hey, this is not right. This has some racial undertone, and so let's correct that.
Yeah.
Alfred is right. What happened to the Fula prince that came from America to Liberia?
Yeah, he went to Liberia because the Fula people are Aboriginal to a place called Futa Jalon in Guinea. And at the time that he was liberated, and the Maninka and many ethnic groups band together, conquered Futa Jalon, that had been selling their
Mhm.
people into slavery. And when they united, they conquered Futa Jalon, sold everybody into slavery, including the royal family.
Wow.
Um, One of them was liberated and sent back. The only place he had to go was Liberia. So they sent him to Liberia and he died. He never made it back to Futa Jalon because Futa Jalon were not safe for him because they had destroyed the place with war, scattered the people, right? So he stayed in Liberia, unfortunately, until he died. And he's
Mm.
buried in Liberia. But
All
again,
right.
like, because why? Liberia, why did he go to Liberia? Because Liberia was an asylum for liberated, freed Africans. He was at that point a liberated, enslaved person. So the place for him to return to was Liberia.
Liberia was that home, was that place
Yeah.
set aside for him as a free man.
Hmm.
So we have another beautiful image here. I see three powerful women. Who are they and what's going on here?
It's just a beautiful artwork again showing the tapestry of the Grain Coast and our people in the highlands of the Grain Coast and their color schemes and their beautiful Malinke swords and uh, so the Mano, the Lama, the Bandi, the
Mhm,
Titi, the Malinka, the Vi, the Gola. These are our colors. And also the Cloud speaking ethnic groups use these and tie their pole knots because we have all become this kind of fluid cultural mesh, right?
mhm,
So you
mhm.
see influences from one rolling into the other, trace your grandmother's lineage back. Even if you were born on the crew coast, you might be surprised to find out that she could have been a Mono woman or a Lama woman or a Pella woman. And you go and trace the other side. You might be from Ganta and find out that your great great grandfather might have been a Vi person because there has always been that fluidity on the Grain Coast. among the Aboriginal population. So our ethnicities are very fluid, they're interchanged, they're interconnected, they're interwoven. And this is one of the things that makes us beautiful. There's nothing in the Constitution that mentions so-called tribe. I do want to point that out. There's no mention of your tribe in the Constitution because your citizenship is not dependent upon it. The only time your ethnicity is even relevant is when it comes to Aboriginal
Right.
ties to land.
Okay.
That's the only time. But there's no mention of Clow or Kisi or Bandi or anything in the Constitution. So if you're a Fula person and you're indigenous to Futa Jalon and you come to Liberia, you have a right to citizenship, but you do not have Aboriginal rights.
So this question is relevant to that. And why Fula are not part of the tribes in Liberia like the Mandingo?
Because they're not Aboriginal to Liberia, that's why. And in the tribes of Liberia, it's only, first of all, I would even argue that the categories of tribes of Liberia are not even really relevant, right, to the Aboriginal heritage, because the Aboriginal heritage is actually tied to clans more than it is to so-called tribe. Because if it was tied to tribe, that means Kru people in Ivory Coast, Dom people in Ivory Coast would have Aboriginal rights to Liberia. So it's not tied to tribe, it's tied to clans. Because the Mono people in Guinea do not have Aboriginal rights in Liberia. So it's tied to the clans that are within the Liberian territory, those original clans that have been tied to the soil older than the Republic. So if you come to Liberia after the Republic is established, you're not an Aborigine.
That is clear.
But the Fula prince who mentioned that was returned to Liberia, he wasn't sent to Liberia because he was an Aborigine. He was sent to Liberia because he was a Black man, and that was the place he would be a citizen. Because Futa Jalon at that time, the empire that he came from had been destroyed. So the only free place on Africa that he could be a free man when he was liberated from slavery was Liberia. As the Constitution says, Liberia is an asylum. So he wasn't going to Liberia because he was an Aborigine of Liberia. He was going to Liberia because he was a Black man.
And that could be a home safe for him to settle.
And that is the requisite for citizenship, not being an Aboriginal. It has nothing to do with citizenship. Aboriginal rights are different from citizenship rights. So I don't know if the person who asked the question had watched the show from the beginning, but I clearly think we explained that in the beginning.
Yeah. So the question I have,
you can't. I don't. This thing about Fula people being part of the tribes of Liberia. There was a guy here on FOL that was saying they wanted to add Fula to the tribes of Liberia. If we're going to add Fulani to the tribes of Liberia, let's add every African ethnic group to the tribes of Liberia.
Yeah.
I don't see how that has anything relevance on citizenship. Where is your clan? Where is the clan? Where is the Fulani clan in the Liberian territory?
And Afra is appreciating you. I appreciate your answer. The government of Liberia needs you to help us rewrite our history. And call to that, may I ask the question? It is not late. Is it? Let me put it this way: is it late for Fula to become a tribe in Liberia? I know from your presentation they will not have Aboriginal rights, right? But tribe is an entirely different thing, correct?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Because if you're saying a tribe of Liberia, you're talking about the Aboriginal people of Liberia. What other point would there be?
What would be the other point? If they want to be recognized as, because the fact here is from the history, the fact that they are Black, they are entitled to Liberian citizenship. And if they are a group of people say, well, we want to be recognized as a group in Liberia, can their tribe be recognized?
What does recognition mean?
Well, they speak a certain language. They have certain unique, maybe set of values, qualities in common, and we know we call them Black people.
Yeah, I'm just asking what recognition means.
And recognition will mean that we accept that they are a tribe, making them part of the tribes of Liberia, historically speaking.
Meaning, so you can't rewrite history to accommodate modern circumstances.
Okay.
And of course, we have a large and growing population of Fall people, mostly from the Guinea Highlands, right? And they have a right to Liberian citizenship.
Okay.
And that is what Liberia can do legally and recognize that you have a right to citizenship. But the recognition of the so-called Aboriginal groups of Liberia is not different from what they call 16 tribes. What that is really doing is recognizing Aboriginal clans.
Okay. Not
And
necessarily.
that is not an invention of modern times. So it's a way, in a sense of saying, I'm going to move to Minnesota as a Liberian person. There's a large group of Liberians in Minnesota. We now want indigenous rights in Minnesota because we're here in great numbers. Is there a Liberian community of American citizens in Minnesota? Yes.
Yes.
Should they have Native American rights like Chippewa Indians? The answer is no.
No. Okay. That is clear. And I asked that question for the
I mean, you got large groups of people who are even indigenous to right here in Mexico, right? They come to the United States. Why aren't they fighting for an Aboriginal rights in the United States? Because their Aboriginal home is south of the border. And even when they become citizens, and there's literally millions of Mexican Americans, you don't see Mexican Americans saying, we want to be among the Native American tribes. Nobody does that.
That is correct. I agree with that. I just wanted that clarity and for our audience to really understand. Yes, in Liberia, the fact that if you are a Fula, you are an African, you are someone of Negro descent, you can become a citizen of Liberia. That will qualify you to run for office, period. So you don't need to have...
There's a reason why people who actually established the country are not among the tribes. They didn't put themselves there for a reason. So I think it's just a matter of education and confusion. And also because of discrimination, right? Because Liberians are pretty cruel and xenophobic at times. So because they want to bully people who have come to Liberia legally, and many of whom are born in Liberia and have a right to be Liberians, and because of the prevailing ignorance of the population, oh my man, go back to Guinea. And so the response is, well, maybe I gotta be recognized as a tribe, so they'll stop telling me to go back to Guinea. Stop telling Liberians to go back to Guinea. That's what you should be doing. Stop telling Liberians to go back to Guinea.
And the fact is, we all migrated somehow from somewhere.
No, we did not. Nobody migrated to Liberia-speaking crew. That language came, and I will put this on and let anybody come and debate me. Nobody migrated to Liberia-speaking crew.
No, what
that
I
language
mean
is endemic to Liberia.
Some of our ancestors travel from history. Some people travel as far as the Songhai and Malay Empire, and
yes, but everyone. So I want you all, if you can, or listening, please go and watch Who Are the Natives of Liberia. I clearly lay out that we do have indigenous people that are native, endemic to the culture and language, and the Cloud-speaking ethnic groups. I was able to systematically lay out how old that language is in this place that we call Liberia, and that it evolved right where it is. So when we say people migrated, it means they're coming with their language and their culture from somewhere else. Not that their language and culture evolved where it is. So that backstory of people saying everybody migrated is a response to the bigotry of people like Dedwo Twet, right? Dedwo Twet used to say, we are the true guardians of this land. And so it used to make people angry.
But he was
right.
right.
So the response to that was to say, no, everybody migrated here. Dedwo Twet was right. Dedwo Twet from Nana Crew, he was right. I'm not cruel, woman. I'm just telling the truth. You know what I'm saying? Maybe it's better I say it than for Dedwo Twet to say it, because I'm a Mono woman from the north. You can say, yeah, Mono people, y'all migrated. Yes, I agree. But if you look at the record, the anthropological and linguistic record, Dedwo Twet was correct. Was it nice of him No, it wasn't nice of him to say that, but it's actually true. There are some groups of people who are so old to the area, you cannot say that they migrated. If you can say they migrated, if Kru people migrated to Liberia, then the Aborigines in Australia also migrated, the Europeans migrated, then everybody is from the Great Rift Valley in Africa. Right? So then we all come from the Great Rift Valley. And if we all come from the Great Rift Valley, then that's it. Right?
All right.
So then you know, there's no Europeans, everybody's African. There's no such thing. And the Yoruba people are not from Nigeria. They also migrated. I mean, come on.
Very, 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 very profound history. I love our nation history. I pray and hope that we will one day get a leader in Liberia who will have this profound understanding that until we know who we are, by teaching ourselves our history and knowing our history, that the decisions we made for the advancement of our country should be based on our historical understanding of who we are. We will just be dancing around this subject. We will now understand ourselves. And you said it right, Carl. We Liberians can be very vicious. He says, "Oh, my man,
yeah, why? Yeah,
beginning, the way you come from, and where is that coming from? Because we don't understand our history. We have not.
And we don't understand what our country is. How you look at somebody born in Liberia and tell them to go to Guinea?
The funding of this nation, if we understand it, no one would tell any black person from anywhere, say, go back to Nigeria. Even if the person have come 2 years ago and declared that they want to be citizen or have gone through the process of
we should welcome them. We should welcome them.
You will not say to that person, go back to Nigeria, the way you come from. People will say
that's correct.
They have no clue, no understanding for what this country.
Yeah, the only reason our fall brothers and sisters want to be recognized as an indigenous tribe is not because they're indigenous, it's because they're being bullied unjustly.
Right. Unjustly.
They know they're not indigenous. They don't want to be bullied. The remedy for that is to educate people.
They just want to be recognized and respected as Liberian citizens. And
that is it.
The rights thereof. That's all they want.
And that is what they deserve because they are citizens and people. They do it to Malinka people. They do it to, they do it to Guinea Pella people. The people who are getting the brunt of it are our fall brothers from the Guinea Highlands. They are getting it. Yeah. A lot of it too is jealousy because of their economic progress.
That could be true also.
There's a lot of funny things involved, but the bottom line is that our government apparatuses, the immigration officers, people need to be educated about our laws and so that people cannot be discriminated against. But the thing that really pains me is that people go to get a passport and because their name is Jallo, oh, you're not Liberian. I mean, that is one of the dumbest things. Your name could be Jackson, you'd be Liberian, but not Jallo. Yeah, man. Y'all have a good night. I gotta go.
and if somebody who is from Nimba County, or maybe somebody from Bon County, Lofa County, who is a Boaka, for example, obtains U.S. citizenship, and then this person is a Boaka, nobody telling you that, though. You're okay with that. But because this person is Yaro, you say, oh, you're not from there. That is so unfair. Folks, we can say thank you so much for sticking with us. We brought you another, informative edition of the Liberian History Channel, always presented here by Carl, who does the research to bring the history to us here free of charge. This is what we do here at Focus on Liberia. We educate, we elevate, and we promote all things Liberia, and our history is key to our existence as a people in the country. The topic was the history of Aboriginal rights and citizenship. If you caught it in the middle, you can go back to it, get it all, share it with somebody, and tell them, Focus on Liberia through the Liberian History Channel with Carl as presenter, teaching the real Liberian history. Don't forget that one, yeah? Carl, anything you want to say before we close?
Yes. When we talk about what makes a country great, it is its diversity. We have to understand that Liberia was established on these principles and it is the diversity of our population that makes us great. We really do need to understand that citizenship is what we need to be recognizing and respecting among each other. And the way that we look at situations, I mean, I just responded to a comment. He said, well, I believe Tula people came to the Grain Coast around the same time as the Mandingo people. Well, you know, Mr. Wills, individual people coming somewhere and trading is not the same thing as having established clans. We don't recognize indigenousness by tribe, but by clan. We just talked about this. Because if you have mono clans in Liberia that are recognized as indigenous, it doesn't mean all mono people in the world, so the ones that live in Guinea, are not indigenous to Liberia. It's the same thing with the Pella people or the Bandi people that live in Guinea and Sierra Leone. The confusion is how people understand things. Citizenship is not recognized in terms of tribe. It's being Black. Indigenousness is tied to the land, and what the land is tied to clans, not by tribe. And I hope that's clear to everyone. So that's why I want to end the note. All right, thanks for me.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you again for the excellent presentation.
You're welcome.
Exciting topic here at Focus on Liberia, the Liberian History Channel. The song that closes the broadcast now says, "We are indeed all Liberians," and don't forget that we are.
Yeah.
Not that song until we catch you again for the edition. Bye bye, folks.
We are Liberians.